As Americans, we wanted to make sure that everyone had managed health care as a solution to problems that we were seeing inside our country. Well, my next guest, Dr. Stephen Trobiani, has written a book on sustainable health care reform. Stephen, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kristen.
So what are some of the problems with managed health care?
Well, the biggest problem with managed health care is the decisions that are being made by the managed care organization to the exclusion of the employers who are paying for health care, the consumers who are using health care, and the healthcare professionals who provide that health care. To my way of thinking, these three groups are the major stakeholders and have been deprived of any voice at all.
So I thought that this was something that we wanted, affordable health care. So what's wrong?
Well, the concept of universal health care is a good concept, and it's certainly something the medical community has wanted forever. The question is, how do we provide universal health care and make it affordable? The solution that we have currently isn't doing that, and it will never do that. Embedded in the Obamacare legislation is a 10% tax on health insurance premiums. This is 10 cents out of every dollar that we pay for insurance premiums that goes directly to Washington. In turn,
did that exist before?
No, it did not.
Okay, so there's a new 10% tax.
As one of many of the taxes that have been levied as part of Obamacare. But this one is particularly troublesome because that tax is going to be passed on by the insurers to every American that now is required to purchase health insurance premiums. So this becomes anything other than affordable. That tax will continue to fuel premium escalation because it's going to be part of the costs that the managed care insurer has to build into their premium. As those costs rise and the taxes sit on top of that, then our premiums escalate. We're probably going to be looking, and in fact, I think Kessler in the Wall Street Journal recently said he estimates that we'll be looking at a 23% increase in our premiums next year, and I would think we're probably going to be seeing double-digit increases in premiums over the course of the next 10 to 15 if it's allowed to go that long.
So what's troubling about this is not only is there a new tax, the premiums are going to rise, but we're required to pay this insurance now?
Yes, and it's an invisible tax. It's not something that is apparent. It's something that is being passed on, as I said, through the premiums that we are obligated to buy. And managed care has not had a track record for being affordable. Managed care started about 30 years ago, about the same time that I began the practice of medicine. And in that time frame, we have seen premiums triple. In just the last 10 years, premiums have gone up 158%.
Wow.
So they haven't offered a solution which has really made healthcare affordable. In fact, managed care has done a number of things besides raising our premiums to the point where they've clearly become unaffordable. It has driven down reimbursement to all healthcare professionals so that the healthcare community is operating on a paper-thin margin of profit. Those profit margins, as they continue to erode, are going to force entity after entity into bankruptcy. And I believe in the next 4 years, the managed care industry is going to acquire ownership of the entire healthcare delivery model. Once that happens, all decisions will be made by either the federal government, the state government, or the managed care insurers. Those decisions are not necessarily in the best interest of the consumer. So this is a problem, and it's a problem I think we have to face now before it becomes...
So it sounds like this new plan is really backing a problem into a corner.
It is backing the consumer into a corner. It is certainly backing the employers into a corner because they're being forced to pay more for this than they have previously. And it's going to destroy the healthcare profession.
Now, you are an insider. You're a physician.
Yes.
What prompted you to write this book?
I can see this coming. And understanding the stakes that we're facing, it was necessary to begin to speak out to create a change. So a lot of people have been talking about the problems with Obamacare, and those are numerous. But rather than dwelling on all of the problems, what I felt we needed to do was create solutions. And so I took a look at why we're in the position we're in, and created a way to get us out of that problem.
So what's a different way to look at it? I know that you have a lot of this detailed in the book, but just give us a little insight as to what's inside the book.
Currently, what we're doing is we're managing healthcare delivery. The problem with that is it's kind of like tweaking the aerodynamics of a car to get better mileage, rather than working on the engine. If you start with the engine, you're going to get much, much better mileage than if you just tweak the aerodynamics. With the healthcare delivery model, there's only so much we can do. What we need to do instead is get at the engine of healthcare, and that is the financial model for healthcare. And we haven't really done that in this country. So I went from that standpoint and said, you know, we can use some of the tools we currently have to create a healthcare fund that is owned by an employer. And if we allow that fund to grow untaxed, in a given period of time, it can grow to the point where it becomes self-sustaining. The employer at that point never needs to fund healthcare again. His employees are fully covered, and the fund will continue to grow so that it will fund them through retirement as well, and solve the problem that we're currently facing with Medicare.
It sounds like a clean and simple solution, so why wasn't this adopted?
Well, there are a couple tax changes that have to occur. Right now, under the IRS code, section 419, which governs employer benefit plans, funds sitting in an employer account can't accumulate beyond what that employer needs for 13 months worth of payments without being taxed. It's a tax neutral issue because the same employer who funds, let's say, an HRA and saves 30% in doing so is now being told under Obamacare that he can no longer do that. That becomes illegal. And he has to go out and purchase a more expensive premium. So it's going to cost him 30% more. If, on the other hand, you allow that 30% to accrue and you allowed that to grow, we would get to the point that I'm talking about, where healthcare funding would become a non-issue.
If we do nothing, if we just let this roll out, what's that going to look like for the patient and for doctors?
The quality of our care is going to decline. Managed care has two ways to continue raising its profits, and it has been very good at doing that. Those two ways are to pay less for the health care that's being provided, but as I've said, we've already gotten to the point where margins are paper thin, so there isn't much room for that. Once the entire healthcare delivery model is owned, there's no room for that. So the next one is to reduce what is allowed to be covered. And we're already seeing insurers who are taking the position that if it's not medically necessary, they don't have to pay for it. And they can declare anything not medically necessary.
Who determines what's not necessary?
The insurer. Again, the consumer has no voice, and in the scenario where every doctor, every nurse, every therapist has become labor because they're now owned by the insurer, there will be no room for the current healthcare professionals expressing their views either.
So what does this look like for you right now inside your own practice, and what are you seeing inside some of your colleagues' practices?
Well, all of us are looking at how we're going to survive over the next few years. I'm looking at about a 5% profit margin, and that means that I have to bill out $1 million a year to make $50,000 in income. But when I do that, the state of Minnesota takes 2% of that $1 million, so that 2% is 20,000 taken out of my 50, so I'm left with 30. it's becoming increasingly hard to make a living under the taxes that are being imposed. And it's going to be so difficult, as I said, that private practice is going to disappear. All practices are going to disappear. We will all be employees of a state-run cartel.
So this is very troubling because, I mean, when I think about medical school, you know, you spend undergrad, graduate school, you get a medical degree. I mean, it's 10 years of education. And part of the reward at the end has always been perceived as, well, you know, you're a doctor, you make a good living. So what has this done to that path?
That was the case. When I first entered 30 years ago, profit margins were at 50%. So if I generated $1 million in billings, I made $500,000 in income. That's no longer the case. We're now looking at much leaner profit margins, but while that's bad for the medical profession, it's worse for consumers because the physician has always been the patient advocate in this system. When you lose that advocacy, the quality of care is going to decline and decline dramatically.
So where are we now in this process? I mean, it's just started. It's just rolling out. So
it is actually nearing completion.
okay.
Obamacare is just rolling out, but managed care has been around for 30 years. What we've done with Obamacare is put managed care on steroids. So now it's going to ramp up faster. It's going to become a more difficult force for any person in the healthcare profession to resist. As I said, profit margins are just going to get too lean, and our autonomy will disappear. As our autonomy disappears, choice disappears. So, you know, the choices in our healthcare, the quality of our healthcare, the outcomes of our healthcare will all be determined for us. We will have no choice.
So why are you doing this? I mean,
because I entered the profession of medicine to help my patients, and I'm no longer going to be in a position to do that. And I know that if we don't make a change and make that change quickly, that no one will be in a position to help any of the individuals who are in need of health care and need of quality health care.
So if someone is watching right now and you're seeing this change and you're concerned about what Dr. Trobiani is talking about, how can they get involved? How can they participate in what you're discussing?
Well, one, people need to become informed. And so I wrote a book. This is called Sustainable Healthcare Reform. It outlines the problems with managed care. It outlines the problems with trying to socialize medicine. And it also goes through in detail the system I'm proposing for changing our healthcare system to make it sustainable. In addition to that, and certainly people are welcome to purchase a book. It's available for I think $9.99 through Kindle on Amazon, through Nook at Barnes & Noble, and through the iBook store for those who have an iPad as an ebook. We can certainly sell you can purchase a book from my website, which is www.politicsinhealthcare.com. But for those people who believe, as I do, that we need to start a movement, that we need an American healthcare revolution, I would like those people to join me in my nonprofit. I've set up a educational nonprofit to spread this message so that we can not only really get people to understand what's happening in healthcare, but also create the movement to change our healthcare system and get a financial model that actually works.
So you say you've started a movement. How can people join this movement?
If they go to the same website, www.politicsinhealthcare.com, and click on the button Donate, they will be directed to Politics and Healthcare Forum, which is the educational nonprofit. I would welcome anyone for as little as $19.99 a month to set up a pledge. We will happily then send them a bound version of the book as our gift, and a T-shirt, which has "Join the Healthcare Revolution" as our motto, as our
Why do you think
thanks.
that healthcare needs a revolution?
We need a revolution because the financing for healthcare has run amok.
You don't think government will be able to sort this out?
No, it's actually quite the opposite. Our federal government has an insatiable need for revenue. The more tax revenue they can take in, the more that need simply grows. The managed care organizations have an equally insatiable need. United Healthcare alone in 2011 took in more revenue than the gross domestic product of all but 59 countries. And yet somehow we can't afford healthcare. And the reason is too much of that money is being siphoned out of the healthcare system and into the pockets of very, very, very wealthy individuals who are managing our healthcare and profiteering from that management.
So when someone goes and joins the movement, what else can they do other than donate?
They can volunteer. We will accept volunteers on every single level. We will train people who are interested in being spokespersons to get in front of a camera, as I'm doing today, and deliver this message.
So if you're looking for a platform and this is something that appeals to you, there's an opportunity to step up and speak out for a movement. Dr. Steve Trobiani, thank you so much for being here. Sustainable healthcare reform, and thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.